Well, good morning, my wonderful viewers. I hope everyone is doing well this morning and getting ready for their Christmas if they celebrate it, and having a wonderful time after Hanukkah or whatever you're celebrating this time of year. I'm not doing a video this morning on tarot decks or doing a reading right now. I was watching a very inspiring video this morning made by Simon, who has the Hermit's Cave Tarot YouTube channel. And he's such a wonderful guy. He's such a sweet, sweet guy, and so generous in sharing all of the decks he has, and providing for live streaming videos for everybody who are doing tarot in the tarot community to get together. I mean, just a wonderful soul. But he did a video this morning on Yuletide and Christmas memories. And it was such a sweet video of his memories from his childhood. But he also asked a lot of us who watch his channel, who are fans of his, he gave us sort of a challenge to do our own video. And it's funny because, I'm going to be 79 in about another week or so. And, I haven't thought that much about my childhood Christmases, only vaguely, But it gave me time to sit down with my tea this morning and really go back and remember what it was I loved about my childhood Christmases. Because we didn't have a lot of money. I was raised in a coal water flat in Brooklyn, New York. And, our stove was a coal stove. That's how old I am. And I was an only child, and I had to come home from school. I was a latchkey kid. And I'd have to empty the ashes from the stove and put some more coal in and, do a few other chores for my mom. And then I'd go out to play and, change clothes, put on my dungarees. We didn't call them jeans in those days. It was dungarees. You put on your dungarees, and no matter what time of year, you go out and play. Because there was no TV set. We did have a radio. That was it. I think at one point my mother had a Victrola that played one record. And she only owned one record. It was the Bluebird of Happiness. And she played it over and over and over again. But Christmas was like a magical time, because this drab apartment with so little furniture and so tiny, 2 small bedrooms, there were no queen-size beds in a bedroom then. The biggest bed that would fit in my parents' bedroom was a double bed. And there were no closets in the bedrooms, so you had to have what my mother called a chifforobe. You had a large closet at the end of each room for your clothes, and a very small dresser. So that was it for the apartment. The living room was very tiny, and so the one chair had to be moved in order to get a tree in the room. But we always had a lovely Christmas and a lovely Christmas tree, except one year, but I'll get to that later. And the tree always sat on a box, but Mother had this paper that looked like it was red bricks from a chimney. So she decorated the box with the red brick chimney paper, and we put the tree on top. And since it had to go in the corner, that was a blessing, because we didn't have the room to put it well into the room. But also she could buy a tree that was a little cheaper because it had a bad side, and we put the bad side toward the corner of the, where the tree was. But we had wonderful decorations for the tree because we had my grandmother's, and I think some of my great-grandmothers. In fact, I still have a few of those left. But under the tree was also magical because we had all those European figures, farm figures. So we could create a whole farm under the tree. And we had every animal, goats and chickens and pigs and just everything. Most of them were lead figures, but some of them were actually like little bisque figures. And I still have an antique iron mailbox that I had under the tree. At one point in our young married life, we had something stolen out of our New York apartment. And years later, decades later, I found this thing. It was probably a duplicate, but my late husband thought it was the same one we had. And I bought it for like $40 on eBay or someplace. And I was so thrilled to find that childhood thing that had been stolen from me. But that was the tree. And oh yes, and Mother always put on and we had the larger lights in those days, not these little teeny white ones. We had colored lights all over. It was so festive. And we also hung the icicles, but Dad wasn't allowed to do that because he would just throw them, and Mother was very fastidious. They had to be hung so that they really hung down. And the other thing we had, which you can't do now, was we had fake snow. And what we used for fake snow was ivory snow. Ivory snow soap had a soap that was like snowflakes. It was like little white flakes, and you would just dab those on the ends of the stems of the tree. And it was just wonderful. It was just a wonderful Christmas festive. And in such a drab apartment as a child, I could just sit there for hours just staring at that tree. Because we didn't get a TV set till I was like 13 years old. And that was only because the Brooklyn Dodgers made the pennant that year. So because the Brooklyn Dodgers were the parent, my mother went out and bought a TV set. And that's a whole other story about that one. But it was a great Christmas. And so for me, the tree was the main thing I remember. The second thing, of course, was the food. I mean, my mother was Lithuanian, her heritage. She was born in this country, but of a Lithuanian mother and grandmother. And my father's family, they were from Germany, but they lived in Poland. They were somehow migrated to Poland sometime in their parents' lives, I guess. So our food was mainly from that area. And I grew up in a Polish-Italian neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. And so many streets were the Polish neighborhood, and then you go over in the Italian neighborhood. So we had Polish bakeries, Polish butchers, Italian butchers. It was a great place to grow up in terms of the food thing. You didn't have to have a car even. Within a 4-block area, you could find anything you needed to buy. Fresh fish, fresh vegetables. The only thing we didn't have was a department store, but once or twice a year we'd go for that. But everything else was available. So for Christmas Eve was a big time, because Christmas Eve is when we opened the presents, at least the children did. And so Christmas dinner was always at my house. It was always a ham dinner. I don't even remember what was with it, but it was always a ham dinner. And then Christmas Day dinner was always a repeat of Thanksgiving. So it was either a small turkey, or my mother would get a capon, which was bigger than a chicken but smaller than a turkey. And Mom and Grandma were great cooks and great bakers. So there were always some pies, and I think at Christmas time it was probably an apple pie, and maybe pumpkin too, and definitely pumpkin for sure at Thanksgiving. And Mother made the best Lithuanian cracker stuffing and the best gravy, rich, beautiful giblet gravy. And we always had sweet potatoes and mashed potatoes. And Mother made great coleslaw, because she didn't just chop it up fine. She hand sliced it very thin, made it the day before, always with Hellmann's mayonnaise, a touch of apple cider vinegar, tiny touch of cayenne pepper to give it a little bit of a kick, and then she grated some carrot in there as well. And just delicious, and it went great with all the other food. And of course cranberry sauce, and it wasn't homemade cranberry sauce, it was right out of the can. You know, I grew up with jellied cranberry sauce. And let's see, so there were carrots, beautiful buttered carrots, and beans. There were always green beans, not a green bean casserole, just straight green beans. My dad was a very fussy eater when it came to certain vegetables, so there were certain things, you know, Mom couldn't make. It's like he was a fisherman, loved to go fishing, but didn't like to eat fish. So our Fridays, since we were Catholic at the time, and you didn't eat meat, we either had a vegetarian pasta dish, or we had seafood. It was either crab that we'd buy at the local store, and Dad would cook up all these beautiful blue shell crabs, and we'd have that. And sometimes we cook fish, and he'd kind of move it around on his plate and not eat it much and sort of grumble. But whenever he went fishing and came home with a huge amount of fish, he always sent me some down to my Catholic school to give it to the nuns, and they definitely appreciated all that fish. So Christmas morning then, we had the leftover ham, but then we also had the Polish things. We had the Polish babka, which is a Polish sweet bread. We had kielbasa, which is a wonderful sausage made with pork and beef. Mom made pickled beets, often with the soaking the hard-boiled, she made pickled eggs, that's right. She made pickled eggs where she took the eggs and soaked them in beet juice, and they were red. And then we had homemade horseradish, which Dad and I grated by hand with the old-fashioned grater. There were no Cuisinarts in those days. And the window in the kitchen had to be open because the fumes were making us all cry. And Dad and I did that. And so that went with the hard-boiled eggs and the babka, the ham, and that. So that big breakfast really lasted us till an early dinner, which was a repeat of the Thanksgiving dinner, which was the whole turkey dinner, and also pies for dessert. Mother also made kruszczyki every Christmas. And kruszczyki, people would ask me what that was like, and I'd say, if you've ever eaten a hard donut and had to dip it in your tea or your coffee, that's what kruszczyki is. But they sell kruszczyki now in the stores, but it's a very thin stuff with sugar on it. Ours was hearty, good old Polish, heavy kruszczyki. But that stuff would last for months underneath the bed in a box with some wax paper. And it's one of those things people will taste it and think, well, what is this? I mean, it doesn't taste much like anything, but maybe a little vanilla and butter and flour. But the more bites you take, you get addicted to it. It's a very strange thing, Christmas drinking. So we had that. So that was my memorable childhood. I do remember one year being disappointed because I was promised a bicycle. I was maybe about 10 or 11 years old, and I didn't get the bicycle. And when I asked my mother why she didn't get me what she promised, she got a little upset and said, well, I don't want to see you getting killed in the streets of New York. And so that summer, my grandmother got me my cousin Anita's old bike because she got a new one. She got a new one for Christmas, so I got her old one. But at least in the summertime, I had a bike to ride when I was staying with my grandmother for the summer. And then in the following year or so, I got a beautiful pair of white roller skates, the kind you wear at the roller rink. So I was a happy kid that year, but not so happy the year I didn't get my bicycle. But then on to my adulthood. I always made wonderful Christmas for my family, cooked a lot of food, had lots of Christmas trees when we had bigger houses when the kids were older. And my daughter now continues that tradition. She's a wonderful cook. My son is a good cook, but he married this wonderful gal, Nicole, who is also a great cook. And so these days I spend my Christmas and Thanksgiving over at their house, and the only thing I have to do is make some pate or maybe bake some cookies some years. So my Christmases are still wonderful and filled with a lot more family now that, I have the grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren, and it's just wonderful. So I think that for me, Christmas boils down to the memories of the tree and the food and eating food with family now. That's it right now, and watching the grandkids enjoy it. We didn't get a lot of presents. If we got one decent present, because I got maybe one decent present like the roller skates, and then maybe 1 or 2 little things. And I once asked my mother, Mom, what did you get for Christmas when you were a little girl? And her answer shocked me. She said, we got an orange. An orange, that was the Christmas present, an orange. Can you imagine? So things have really changed, because when I see what my grandchildren open up, I mean, the room is filled with so many presents. I mean, for watches and guitars and computer things and clothes and games and books. I mean, it's amazing how society has changed and how all of this has changed. But all the wonderful things still remain, the wonderful spirit of Christmas and getting together with family. It's just the most magical time of year for me. So I hope the rest of you take Simon up on his challenge and make a video and put it on your YouTube page so that all of us can share in each other's wonderful things, whether you celebrate Hanukkah or Christmas or some other thing at this time of year. It would be wonderful to see what your Christmas memories are, what your best ones are, and maybe what some of your unhappy memories are. I remember one year my dad had a little too much to drink and bought the tree and came home, and the tree was really a disaster. It was like a Charlie Brown. Mom never let him go buy a tree again. So we all have these wonderful memories. Oh, I have one more memory. I have one sort of funny, good and bad memory. Years ago, we were living in Canada because my husband Jim was working there, and the children were, I guess, maybe about 11 and 15 or 12 and 16. And we lived in this beautiful, rebuilt, antique log house. And it was on 18 acres, so we didn't have a lot of close neighbors, because some of my neighbor behind me and in front of me, they each had 60 acres, so we didn't see a lot of people there. But after dinner, that year I made a Charles Dickens dinner with the roast goose, and I made a stuffing with apples and sausages from a Julia Child cookbook, and then the regular vegetables that I would always make at Christmas time. And I had plum pudding for dessert. So after dinner, the children and Jim went into the living room, and we had this big, beautiful, almost walk-in type fireplace. And that fireplace was on, and I was starting to put things away. And at the back door, there was a noise. I checked the door, and there were the 2 most beautiful, mature dogs. And they were, what do you call them? Those big red dogs, not golden retrievers, but the other ones. Anyway, I opened the door because they looked cold, they looked lost, and they came in. And they were just wagging their tail. Oh, Irish setters. That's right, they're Irish setters. So they were wagging their tails, and I thought, okay, well, let me get the food put away, and then I'll, call and see if I can find out where they belong. And the next thing I know, the dogs had found the table with the food. Now, we had a little Lhasa Apso at the time. She couldn't climb up on anything, not even a chair, basically. Maybe she could jump on the sofa with some help, because she was a little older then. They had found the goose. They now had possession of the goose, and were now eating the goose in the dining room. Well, needless to say, we didn't have any goose leftovers that year. But what can you do? So I took the goose away from them, and then I cut the meat off and fed them and gave them water. And so next thing you know, they were well fed, and each of them went into the living room, and they just parked themselves like bookends on either side of the warm fireplace and fell asleep. So I finished putting away the food, got on the phone, and of course you can't find anybody on Christmas other than the police department, because I tried. Got the police department, called and left message that I had these two beautiful dogs at my house and told them where I was. So a while later, this man came to the back door, this poor frantic guy looking for his beautiful dogs. And he was so apologetic, and I could just imagine the angst he had gone through, driving around looking for these dogs, and like me trying to call and not being able to find anybody at like shelters or anything. And he said that he had had the male dog who used to run away all the time. And he built this tall fence, and the male dog would still get over the fence. So then he decided to buy a female to keep him company, figuring if he had company, he wouldn't go wandering. Of course, now he had two dogs wandering in the neighborhood. So I don't know how he solved that problem down the line, but I never saw the dogs again. But that was a memorable Christmas for many reasons. It was a happy family time, and we had a wonderful story to tell about it. So I hope you all watching this, if you stayed to watch it, because I just started this video a very short while ago, so I don't have that many viewers. But I do hope that you will take Simon up on his challenge and maybe make your own video about your wonderful holiday memories, the good ones and the bad ones. So thank you again for watching, and when you leave, maybe you can hit a like button and subscribe for other videos. So if I don't see you for a while, I wish you a wonderful holiday season and a happy and healthy and prosperous new year. So namaste to you all. Thank you.